This week I'm going to be showing how to refashion two of the same sweater because I have these two identical Walmart brand sweaters that I bought for an event that was going to happen at my college last year, but a certain global pandemic, and I don't want to name names, COVID, happened and that event never took place, so now I still have these two sweaters that honestly I'm never going to wear in their original form because it's not really my color or my style. But yesterday a friend of mine from said college texted me and she was like, I have something to give you, can we meet halfway between your house and the college where she still goes because she's younger than me? And I was like, yeah, sure, sounds great. I love getting stuff. And I thought that it would be nice since she's bringing me something if I brought her something, and I realized I had these two sweaters just sitting in my sewing cabinet doing nothing, and I thought I would see if I could flip them into something that she might like wearing. If you're wondering why I've got my fun open sleeve dress on today, it's because in a little bit I get to go get that Dolly Parton juice shot into my veins, and yes, that is what I call the COVID-19 vaccine. I get it because I work with children, and because I'm fat, but I'm going to tell people it's because I work with children. So we have covered my objective, my core materials, and a random fact about my personal life that none of you care about, so that seems like a standard intro. Let's go ahead and get started. So besides those primary sweaters, the materials I'm going to work with today are this stretchy black lace fabric and this white sheer fabric that is left over from trimming someone's curtains. This is just a shot of what the sweaters looked like before I started work on them. They are basic, they are blue, they are boring. Let's change that. I think the big challenge today is going to be that the sweaters are knit, so you can't just cut into them and expect them not to fray. I'm going to be experimenting with trying to hem them without using my serger because it's not threaded, and as we know from much watching of this channel, I am so lazy. So we're going to try to get away without threading it, and I think I'm going to be able to do that with rolled hems and a zigzag stitch, but we will see. The first step in the first refashion was separating the back from one of the sweaters and taking it off because I wanted to replace it with some of that black lace to make a lacy sheer back. And I started with a seam ripper, ripping out all the seams very carefully, very slowly, and then that got really tiring and I just took scissors to it, and I have no regrets because it worked out just fine. So now we effectively have a sweater back and a backless sweater. So the next thing I'm going to do is take this lace and lay the sweater back on top of it and cut out a new back out of this fabric instead. I laid it down and I did some trim, and I got my new back. Here you see me leaving some extra space for seam allowance. I realized later I didn't need that and I trimmed it away, so do as I say, not as I do, and don't leave any room for seam allowance if you do this. I also cut down the center front a little bit because I wanted it to have a more open neckline with a lace-up feature. I was gone, but I'm back. I'm ready to sew. I'm vaccinated. # Queens get vaccines. Let's go. The next step was pinning the lace back and the body of the sweater right sides together, along the side seams and the neckline. I want to point out that I did keep the original collar because I think that makes it look very cute and modern. Then I just went around and sewed everything together, right sides together. So I'm doing this with a zigzag stitch for two reasons. One, it allows for stretch, which is good for both the stretchiness of the lace and the knit fabric, but also it sort of finishes the edges as it goes. So you could also do this step with a serger, but because mine wasn't threaded in black, I just went right over the edge with that zigzag stitch. You can see that one side is on the fabric and one side is off the fabric. This creates a serger-like effect, wrapping around those loose edges and preventing fraying. And in this slightly off-camera shot, I'm cutting small slits around that neckline slit that I added earlier so that I can lace it up. There's a mallet on the floor next to me, not because I was doing some casual carpentry, but because I tried pounding in some grommets and it just didn't really work with the looseness of this weave and they were falling out, but the fabric wasn't fraying, so just slits themselves wound up working just fine. I grabbed a black ribbon to lace up the neckline to match the color scheme, and I melted the ends with a lighter so that they wouldn't fray. This technique only works on synthetic ribbons or synthetic cotton blends that are heavily synthetic. If you do it with pure cotton ribbon, you will burn your hand, and I will not feel bad because I warned you. I used that ribbon to lace up those neckline slits. I wish I had a better name for them. I do not, and that was the end of the first sweater refashion. To begin working on the second sweater, I started by making cuffs for the bottom of the sleeves out of that white fabric. So here the fabric is layered over itself 4 times, but there's only a fold on the left. The bottom is loose edges. So what I'm doing is drawing a quarter of a circle, and when I cut it out, it'll unfold to be 2 half circles. I'll sew them together the same way you would an A-line half circle skirt, and then I'll attach them to the bottom of those sleeves. The next thing I did was use my dressmaking ruler to mark the sweater for cropping. It was a little bit difficult because the bottom of the sweater was a bit bunched by the ribbing, but I ended up getting a pretty even line. And then I ended up getting a second pretty even line when I cut it again because I realized Helen is shorter than me and she probably needed that shorter for it to be considered a crop top. Now I will tell you, I thought that I was going to have to hem this, but nope, it just curled in on itself a lot like a t-shirt hem will and did not fray at all. I guess it was a tighter knit than I was expecting, but it was a pleasant surprise. I also went ahead and cut off the ribbed cuffs on the sleeves to make room for my cuffs. I put together those cuffs with a French seam, so that means I sewed the wrong sides together, then I trimmed down that seam allowance as small as it could go, and then I flipped it around and sewed the right sides together, which winds up with all the raw edges enclosed on the inside of that seam. Then I used the same zigzag stitch around the edge strategy that I used to attach the lace back to attach those to the bottom of the sleeves. This next step I kind of did on a whim, but I wound up really loving it. So I took some white lace I had on hand and sewed it to the neckline. But as I was sewing, I would sort of just randomly create these pleats to create a ruffled effect. And then I also did that around the sleeves where they met the cuffs. Doesn't it look so cute? I think it's really adorable if I'm being honest. And here's the lovely Helen, queen of mirror selfies and working those angles, modeling these pieces for me. I think they look adorable on her. I'm really happy with how they turned out, and she even styled this one with a corset, which I thought was so cute. Thanks for sticking through this video. Feel free to stick around and see what we do next week.